that I'm at an all-time.
Hello and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host Larry Vasquez and you're listening to episode 48. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the first podcast of 2017. In this podcast, we have a returning guest, Ted T. Ted T has been one of our feature animation instructors since the beginning. He's been a long time Walt Disney Animation Studio animator and DreamWorks animator, and has recently moved up to Montreal, his hometown, to be an animation director at L'Atelier, one of the independent boutiques up there, and just recently released, as of I think Christmas, their first feature. One of the things that's made this podcast very unique and fun was not only be able to catch up with Ted, but to be able to pull on two other guests, India Barnardo and Martin Smith, two iAnimate students, Martin being one of our first students here at iAnimate and alumni as well. Ted, when he started it up there in L'Atelier, had to recruit animators, and so he pulled a bunch of iAnimate students, former students and alumni, and these are two that were there that we're going to get to talk to as well. So this was a very fun, informative podcast, and you're able just to catch up with these guys. So take a listen.
How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing all right. Ted, how's it going?
Good.
Ted, you got to help me out here, buddy. How do you pronounce the name of the company again?
Okay, so here's how you pronounce it. L'Atelier.
If it makes you feel any better, Larry, I worked there for just over a year, and I still struggle to tell people, say to people now.
Atelier. Okay.
Perfect.
All right. And everybody's doing really good?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
All right.
It's nice to
That's
see
the
my
weekend.
people.
I know this is way cool.
It's so nice. It's so nice to see them. Like it's heartwarming to see them. It sounds strange to say, but like everyone developed such a close bond that I miss everyone. Literally, like I think about them all the time, walking on the street, just sitting in the studio. Like I feel like the spirits of everyone's kind of still in there.
That's awesome.
Every time you see some fried chicken or some poutine.
Yes, I go, wow, Martin. I was gonna say, yeah. There's an alleyway I walk by all the time, and I think of Martin. And it sounds bad, but because we shot part of the thank you video there, we'll exclude that from the comment.
It's where we used to hang out when we were on breaks.
Be tough,
Yeah.
bully people, and take their lunch money.
Now, real quick, Martin in India, where are you guys at right now? I know you guys are in the UK, but
NPC.
both are at MPC?
Yeah, advertising.
Very cool. First of all, I kind of want to jump into, for you, Ted, particularly, we've had a podcast with you before, so I'm going to direct listeners to that. But I think what's interesting from your kind of vantage point, and we're going to jump into this right now. So what's interesting from your vantage point is your, I guess, transition and move from DreamWorks to L'Atelier, right? All right. Kind of your journey to there. And so we've kind of got a little bit your backstory, how you got into animation. But I think that's a unique and interesting story there. You're from Canada and kind of how you got moved there. And then obviously Martin and India, just how you guys got into animation. I know you guys come through iAnimate, and Martin, you were one of our early graduates there. But then how you guys even got hooked up to work with Ted up there. So I'm kind of curious about that. Maybe Ted, let's jump with you and kind of see kind of how you journeyed over there.
Sure. Just in a nutshell, in the spring of 2014, unfortunately, my dad went through some medical issues. Eventually, we lost him. But in the transition of coming to see him back in Montreal from Los Angeles, which was near the end of How to Train Your Dragon 2, we lost him. And when I was visiting him here in the hospital, I realized that since the situation wasn't good, it made me real well. At the time, actually, the situation seemed recoverable. And I started thinking, wow, at one point, what more do I have to say in LA? I mean, I love DreamWorks, and they're a second family to me there, and everyone's wonderful and super talented. But I thought, at what point am I going to go back? I really like to balance my life a little and spend some time with my family again.
Yeah.
And so I decided to do an interview with L'Atelier. Someone reached out to me from a recruiting service here because I was recommended by Dave Hubert.
Okay.
And he said, basically, you know, he's pretty much the furniture at DreamWorks, but you could try. But he actually respectfully asked me if it was okay for them to reach out. And it was just at the same time that I was thinking about the possibility of coming back in the future, but not at that time.
Okay.
And I did the interview, and I'd heard kind of not so great things about the studio. So I went in there prepared just to make it an exercise and practicing to interview in case I ever wanted to come back.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone turned out to be really great,
Mm-hmm.
and they really had their act together, and it surprised me a lot. And then things, unfortunately, turned for the worse for my dad. And so my mindset really wasn't there, but things were so heavy. At one point, they called me back for a second interview, and just to distract myself, I came back in, and we did a Skype interview with the producers in France. But it was the most laggy, blurry, worst Skype ever. I heard all of their questions about 4 seconds late. And I responded 4 seconds late, and all the jokes were off. And we wrapped up the interview, and I said, you know what? I guess that's done. And, you know, I was asked, well, what do you think? And I said, you know, give the position to someone else because I've got other things on my mind and I have a commitment at DreamWorks. But then they called me again about a month later, and they said, hey, would you just happen to read the script and get back to the producers like tomorrow? I'm like, well, I got work here, but okay, I'll read it and I'll call them back. So I read it over the weekend, and there were a few holes, but again, surprisingly, it was much better than I had expected it to be. And so after everything that had happened with my family and finishing Crunch, flying back and forth to finish Dragons 2, starting Penguins of Madagascar, I was pretty wiped out.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talked to the producer on the phone, I said, look, he was like, we should talk again. I said, okay, well, yeah, the last Skype wasn't very good. We should probably not like have a 5-second delay between questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, okay, we can Skype again. So no, you should come to Paris. I said, honestly, I'm wiped out. And the only weekend I have is 4th of July to really kind of recoup a little bit and just kind of not like go out and eat hamburgers and watch fireworks, but kind of sleep. And they said, look, the worst comes to worst. You have a good weekend here and no commitment. I said, well, it's going to be kind of an undertaking for you guys. And they said, don't worry about it. And then so they ended up flying me there. And at this point, to be very honest, I don't know if I've admitted to anyone. I wasn't intending to, you know, I wanted to be fair because they had really been generous and patient. And so I did my homework before I went over, and I read the script and I broke it down and I wrote all my notes and thought about what approach I might take if I really were to anim direct it, since I'd never anim directed. And I ended up meeting them. And then the next day, Orly Dupont, Jeremy Bellinger, the two étoile dancers who eventually did our choreography and our reference. I met the whole team. And then on the Monday morning, I was there 3 days. I went into work with the producers, and we just pulled up the animatic, and we had the script, and we went through chronologically. And after like 2.5 hours, I pretty much, again, was surprised. And I felt like, wow, I would really like to be here.
That's cool.
Yeah, the producers were collaborative and open and cared about the characters. And so I wasn't used to this, you know, from LA. And so I got on the plane and headed back to LA, strangely knowing that my life had just kind of changed. But I didn't sign anything. I waited to talk to DreamWorks first. And I told them, you know, my intention really was to come back and be with my mom and take care of her. And this opportunity just happened to be at the exact same time. And I was really worried. It took me like a month to muster up, like, you know, Atelier was like, what's going on? I'm like, I haven't talked to them yet. I'm really busy. But I was really terrified because I have such a good relationship with them, and I was mid-contract. But they gave me their blessing. They said, you know, you're welcome to come back anytime. And we're really happy that you're going to be back with your family and for this great opportunity.
Oh, that's awesome. That's very, very cool.
Yeah.
That's a great testimony about the company.
Well, and Jeffrey too, I wrote to him to say thanks, because essentially I'd worked for him for like 20 years.
That's crazy.
Between Disney and DreamWorks.
Uh-huh.
I said, thank you for the chance. Just want to let you know I'm headed back to Montreal. And he writes back like 2 seconds after I hit enter. He's like, come to my office. That's exactly what he wrote. I'm like, he's going to fire me before I can leave. I'm going to get that. You'll never work in this town again. Line.
Yeah. You can't quit. You're fired. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I went over there, and his executive assistant, Larry, I know him well. And I'm like, Larry, what? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, oh no.
He didn't help you out, huh?
Yeah, he didn't help me out at all. And I went in his office, and basically he just said, I got 2 words for you. And I was like, what 2 words? I think the worst possible 2 words he could say to me. And he said, work hard. He said, you've always worked hard for me, and you're going to go through some really smooth times and some really bumpy times. But if you hunker down and you work hard, it's going to solve everything. And he took a picture and gave me a big hug, and that was it.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we'll come back to some of this here. Let's go with you, India. Well, actually, I'm going to go with Martin, because I think part of your journey into iAnimate was through, obviously, Martin here. So, Martin, how did you get into, or what made you want to get into animation? How did you come across iAnimate? And then maybe eventually hear how you landed at L'Atelier.
Yes. So I spent most of my 20s attempting to be an architect, and I think I was all right at it. I probably could have taken it somewhere ultimately, but it never felt like something that I really loved. And there's this funny thing that happens with most creative professions, that you spend a decent amount of time at the bottom of the rung, sort of picking up other people's scraps, and it's not for quite a few years until you get to really sink your teeth into something that personifies that profession. And architecture is very much one of those. Like, I spent a lot of years doing dealing with contractors and sourcing materials for buildings, and I spent very little time actually working on designs and ideas, which is what in my mind's eye I imagined what it was going to be. So I think I was traveling around Southeast Asia, and I remember being in this town, sat by a pool, terrible thing. And I thought to myself, do I really want to keep doing this for the rest of my life? Like, I wasn't really earning a particularly great amount of money, and I didn't enjoy doing it. I thought to myself, I could either take time away, get better at this in a different way, and maybe reapproach it. I could go and do a job that just gives me more money and accept that as my thing, or I could go away and do something that I really want to do, something that I've always sort of dreamed of doing. And animation had always seemed like this impossible dream to me, something for other people, especially by that point I was, I must have been 28, 29. And so, it's something that you do when you're 13, 12, 8, when you're born, you start drawing straight away, and then and it's by the time you're 21, you've already got your first job at Disney. That's how it works. And so I thought to myself, I never considered it to be a realistic possibility for me, but the one thing that architecture did give me was confidence in my creative abilities. And I thought, well, maybe that's something that I can do then. Maybe I could be an animator if I was willing to make some sacrifices and commit to it and really focus on it, and it's something that might actually be a possibility. So I came back to England, moved back in with my mum, and locked myself away for a couple of years. Did a course locally, which wasn't too fruitful, and then did iAnimate, and I was in the first class. Did the whole 6 workshops as there were at the time, including a stint with Ted, and came out the other end, and then that was me into the big wide world.
How did you hear about iAnimate?
I think there was some discussions on the website, 11 Second Club.
Okay.
A few people had been talking about it and saying, "Oh, there's this new class starting up. It's going to be, it's going to be wonderful. And there's all these teachers that everybody had heard about from podcasts and different places. And I thought that sounds like a great idea. It seemed like a bit of a gamble because it was an unknown quantity.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, the only thing that we really had, which was a wonderful thing, was Jason Ryan's lectures. But beyond that, it was an unknown. But it felt like one of those sort of risks that was worth taking at the time. And turns out it was a good decision.
Absolutely. And India, what about you?
Well, my journey into animation is a bit different. I went through school loving fine art, painting, drawing, and I was like, I'm going to be a painter. That's it. My school advised me that maybe that's not the best stable career choice in the world, but I was adamant. I was like, I want to just paint things. And then from there, I got to
because it didn't work out for Picasso.
No, yeah, exactly. And then I got to about, I guess it's like 17 or 18 when you start applying for universities here. And I looked at one of the universities in England, and an old student from my school had been to the same one, and I thought, okay, I'd already done a work experience when I was about 16 at Frame Store, and I'd gone and stayed there for a couple of weeks, and I saw all these people doing insane amount of different jobs that I'd never even imagined that existed. And I think there was a bit of me in my head. I saw like a making of Monsters Inc. on the DVD. And actually it was the hair people, the fur people, that I was like, wow, their job looks cool. That looks fun. And I sort of researched it a bit more, and I went to uni, started my first day, and I picked computer animation. So it was a bit broader than just characters. It was bits of, like, you did some modeling and some rigging and stuff. And I realized that fur wasn't for me because it's very technical. And, I like maths, but not that much to do a degree. So anyway, not knowing anything about animation or having ever really thought about it previous to starting this course, on my first day, I was like, what am I doing? What have I done? I have no idea. And people sat next to me that have been, like Martin said, have been doing it since they're 13 or 14, and they know Maya and they know all these wonderful things that I had no idea about. And then I just fell in love with it as soon as we had a 2D module, and you do a bouncing ball. I was like, okay, yeah, this is pretty cool. I'm going to go this way. I can draw and make it move. So yeah, that's fine. That's good. And then I just got more and more obsessed as it went on. And then I left uni having met and kept in contact with Framestore. So I went to work with them and eventually moved up the ranks from washing mugs to animating and all that sort of thing. And then after about 3.5 years or 2.5 years of being there, I managed to meet Martin, oddly through Twitter, about animation, and kind of related to iAnimate, because he was doing these daily sort of animation exercises with a skyscraper.
Ah, okay.
And I saw it on Twitter, and he said, oh, what shall I do for the next one? So I said, oh, skipping, I think it was. And, he replied like, yeah, sure. And then he did it.
Skyscraper, the glue that binds us.
Yeah, he's like, cute girl, give me a suggestion. Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
And then anyway, so we met, and I actually told him to go to this animation thing in London, and we met, and obviously all the rest of that is history.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just finishing, as I met him, he was just finishing Ted's class, which I think he missed one of the lectures because of me, maybe.
No, we don't. This is not
unlikely story.
This is kind of like, when kids grow up and then they start talking about when they're growing up and their parents, I didn't know you did that.
Wait a minute.
Exactly.
You told me you were doing this.
But I mean, Martin, it wasn't the only thing he talked about, but he he told me a lot about Ted's classes and all the other classes he'd been involved with, and Ken, and it was just like, oh, it sounds really like such a great platform to sort of improve your skill, or as Martin did, start from almost the bottom up and just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been at French Store a while at that point, and I'd wanted to find a way to improve my polish and my general sort of, what's the right word? Basically in advertising, there's a lot of turnover in projects, so the amount of time you get to spend on a shot is not very long, and it doesn't really improve your level of detail, because you've only got so much time.
Right.
You can only get in as much as you can, and as much as they want it out the door yesterday kind of deal.
Yeah.
So I thought iAnimate would give me the opportunity to really concentrate on the shot and not worry about fulfilling a very short deadline, because it'd be more feature level work, animation work.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, through Martin, I basically thought iAnimate seems like a good place to go. Like, he told me which lecturers taught in different ways, and who would work with me, and
Don't
take Ted's class. And
that'd be the first mistake.
Yeah. Well, I did, because I had Stephen Melograno for Workshop 2, and then I took Mike Walling's class for Workshop 3, and then I paid for Ted's Workshop 4 class, but somehow ended up at L'Atelier.
Oh, okay. So like, they can pay me and I can be with Ted.
Yeah. I quickly email Kent, please come. I'm going to work with Ted now.
That's awesome.
He's going to pay me now.
Yeah.
I don't know if Ted will want to see me 24 hours a day. And through that, obviously that's how Martin introduced me to iAnimate, and it was, I wouldn't be where I am now without it.
That's awesome.
So,
fantastic. Okay, that's a great segue, because I wanted to talk with you, Ted, in regards to how you're now at this studio here. They're giving you some leeway now for creativity. How did you start? Did you have a team there? Did you now need to start pulling in? Because I know you got a lot of the iAnimate graduates and students and such here. So how did that come about? Pulling your team together.
Well, yeah, that was a very tricky thing, because the moment I knew that I was going to accept the role, I have a kind of a Rolodex in my head with all the people, like all the ex-iAnimate students that I've really just taken note of. And not just artistically, but very importantly, personality-wise. Work ethic-wise, people who kept their word, people who did things on time, people who are devoted to making themselves better, egoless people, or as much as artists can be egoists like any other normal person. And so over a broad spectrum of qualifications, I keep people in mind. Not ever really having the thought of being an anim director in my head, because I love animating. But now it's kind of like, okay, well, what happens? And then also you have restrictions to hiring because of where financing comes from for films. I was very restricted, and I wasn't able to hire Americans very easily at all. There's very big restrictions, through certain countries, because you're getting money from Canada, et cetera, et cetera. So I started going, okay, well, who do I feel fits the mold, and what does that mean? I had to establish the structure of what I wanted first. So one thing I've heard a lot about that takes place in studios in Montreal was a lot of cliques would form at different studios, and cliques are just erosive. A good environment is one where you get along with everyone and you feel as if you could speak to anyone at any given time.
Right.
The test is, if you were there at lunch, and your crew wasn't around, would you still sit with the other people? And so I really wanted to reduce that. I didn't know if I could do it or not. Like, all of this was theory, right? And so I said, okay, what could minimize that? And I wanted to hire 50% girls, 50% guys, 50% French speaking, 50% English speaking right away, to kind of break that down and to help avoid that. And then I went through my list of who I thought we had 11 iAnimate people on our crew, 9 ex-students of mine personally. And then the rest came through recommendations from around town, and slowly just started doing very extensive interviews, and then choosing people one by one. And the tough part about it is that a lot of it's gut feeling, because obviously a lot of people couldn't show me demo reels because they were working on the film. They were working on a film and couldn't release anything to me. So the interviews had to be really deep to allow me a better picture of them. And here's the thing, I won't hire anyone that I wouldn't work for.
Okay.
And that's a big philosophy of mine. Now, granted, there was a couple of things that I missed in the interviews. You know, not everyone's going to work out all the time.
Right.
But I think a couple out of 34 total animators, we only had 30 at one time in the studio, but people had kids and, you know, things like that. So we would replace them with someone new. And, you know, it pretty much worked if only 2 out of 34 kind of didn't work out for just different reasons.
Right.
Nothing, you know, personal. But really it was about, could this person fit? It's really, you know, I'm a big hockey fan, and the Miracle team in 1982, the US team, Herb Brooks was the coach, and he famously picked his team within 2 days after gathering the best college players in the US. He put his team together in 2 days and riled the feathers of everyone who had organized it. They said, well, this isn't the best team. Look at on paper, this is not the best team. And he goes, I don't care. I don't want the best team. I want the right team. And that always stuck in my head. And I wanted to do that because, you know what, I believe in mentorship, and I believe that everyone given the right opportunity and explain the right kind of expectations and of what's expected of them, and I don't know, the accountability that they need to have, can be guided into being a great animator. I don't think there's such a thing as someone who can't become a great animator. They just need the shot. And I wanted to give a lot of people a chance. And because I didn't know whether this was going to be my last movie, I wanted to do it in a way in which I thought it should be done. People treated fairly, and encouraged and supported, and then you see from there. So that's kind of how I did it. It took
Very
like
cool.
a month and a half, put some people together.
That's awesome. Now, you said 30 animators. That's a pretty good sized team there.
It is, yeah.
How many people were there prior? Was there anybody as far as animators?
No,
or were you
blank slate.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
So both
scary.
of you two had a interview for this.
Yes.
Yes. Well,
I love the laugh first.
it was.
For both.
I think. I mean, Ted can speak to this in more detail, but I think because we were to some extent a more known quantity than a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially, obviously, some of the local people that Ted hadn't interacted with before. So for us, the interview was the strangest interview I've ever had, to be honest. It was on Skype, and we were both
Together
in the same room, sat next to each other. And we were like, I think because we used to walk home from work. We were both working in Soho in London at the time. And I remember walking home to that interview thinking, oh, we're nervous and sweaty palms. And we were talking over some of the things that we could say. And India's really good at interviews. And so she'd written like this wonderful list of questions and things that we could ask Ted and just to kind of get the conversation going and have some interaction. And we sat down, and the video came up, and Ted's sitting in the conference room with I think Laurent and some other people from the studio. And they're all sat there, and we're like, here we go. And Ted's like, how's it going? You all right? And we're like, yeah, I think. And then we chatted for about 5 minutes, and then India basically ended up interviewing Ted for about 30.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd never, it's strange. She's the first one who ever had a list of questions for us.
Very cool.
And she's like, and because we briefly asked her, like, so do you have questions for, well, actually, holds out this huge, like 8-foot-long sheet of paper with questions. I'm like, wow, am I hired? Yeah. Well, actually, the India wasn't a known quantity to me.
Because she hadn't entered the class yet with you.
No. And anyone who knows me knows that even though there's a relation to Martin, I would never hire anyone who's unqualified.
Mm-hmm.
That's like first and foremost. Favoritism, prior experiences don't affect me. I can't do that, you know. I have to put the studio first. But, having seen India's work, the interview was just to confirm that she wasn't crazy, she's
with Morton.
So that's where the question came from. No. But in all honesty, like the work was there, so it wasn't. That's all I needed to know, and then we just needed to meet and talk about things.
Although I can add, I think me and Martin got off lightly in terms of interviews.
You did.
Because when we got to L'Atelier, we heard some of the interviews, like stories from our colleagues, and man, they were tough.
They were.
Yeah. Oh, some of the questions, Ted.
the joy.
What was it? Yeah, what I always remember Chloe's one was it about? Oh, it was about a painting, wasn't it? Was that no?
Oh,
Anyway,
maybe it was a question about Matisse. I have a lot of questions that I would ask people in regards to how they perceived things off of certain quotes from that I'd found.
So you would just throw out this quote, and now they were to give you feedback. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
As to how it relates to them and how they perceive their world.
Very cool. Now, is this something that you? Go ahead, Martin.
No, I was going to say, I think you had I remember one of the other ones was. Sorry to derail you there, Larry. If you wanted to carry on with that, I can come in afterwards.
No, go ahead.
No. Okay. I think one of the ones that I remember personally was we had. I think it might have been with Martin, who there was another Martin, but a Quebecois guy. So he pronounces his name properly instead of my broken English version. But I think he got asked a question and something along the lines of, how do you feel about Buster Keaton or a certain actor? And he just responded saying, I've never heard of him, and I'm not sure. And Ted was like so impressed that he was honest. And that he was like, he much preferred the idea that he was honest instead of just tried to spiel off something about this person that he'd never heard of and had no idea about. I remember he came to us after and was like, it's really good. He didn't know about this thing. And it was great because he told me that. I really appreciate it.
That's awesome.
I mean, because honesty is the key, right? If you intend to improve, the relationship has to be completely transparent. Mm-hmm. And it means you trust me saying you don't know how, and I trust you because you told me you don't know how. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because, honestly, everyone thinks like we're so close to our work and it's so personal. And depending on your background and how you've gotten to where you are, you might be more or less secure about it. But here's the thing. A lot of people feel as if the quality of their work reflects on who they are as a person and the long-term outcome of their success. But it has nothing to do with it. If it doesn't work, you fix it. You move on. Like there's no magic. There's no magic bullet. That's it. It doesn't work. You fix it, and then that's it.
We're giving away all of Ted's tricks now.
Oh, I've come up with more tricks.
Oh, okay.
Okay, see, now you segued back for me because that was going to be my question when you asked about the quotes here. Was that something that you'd come up with, or was that something that, because you mentioned you've been in, at least at Disney and DreamWorks for 20 years. Was that something that kind of developed there, or?
No. I have a black book that I keep that has tons of ideas I have about animation. Anything that I read, I write in there. Aw, that's amazing.
India's pulling up a Post-it that she has.
Sorry, it was a bit late.
Oh, that's amazing. We didn't plan this, by the way. So sorry, as a little aside here, I would go around, and after I got to know the animators and their strengths and shortcomings, I would go by and put Post-its on their desk that had a phrase
Oh, that's cool.
in order for them to reflect upon it. And
India's pulling them up right now.
India's actually says, if it's wrong, we just fix it. There's another one that says stand tall. And I wanted them to be a little obscure in order for people to actually have to think about it.
Okay.
Right? Because that's the thing. In the end, animation, there's nothing we're actually touching, is there, in CG animation besides the mouse and the keys? So animation becomes an abstraction of how we think and how we perceive moving something in virtual space that translates motion into emotion.
Mm-hmm.
That's understood by an audience clearly with a clear intention. And that is only understood if you had a clear intention when you went in there. But you can't just copy a technique and a perfect workflow and get to that result. It might look great, it probably would, but it's empty and meaningless. And I think every animator has such a strong opinion to give because they're individuals with a point of view and a perspective and a different way of expressing their emotions. And the only way is to really think critically. You have to really push yourself to be an advanced thinker and really think of things abstractly and then turn them into something concrete. Because think about it, whenever you show someone your animation and they say, wow, it feels good. Oh, that feels really cool. The word feel is always in there. People don't sit down and break your shot down. They give you the initial reaction, a gut visceral reaction. And that's an abstraction. It could be a really rough test, especially in 2D. It was really not as structured as it would be eventually when it was done. So what people have to go off of is how their brains put this together. Imagery versus understanding. And if you can train your mind to take ideas and feelings that you have and translate and execute them into something that's easily understood and clear in whatever particular medium you use, then I think you're successful. You just can't go through and say, I want to be like one of the great animators out there. It doesn't work. You can come alongside and study and see what they do technique-wise, but in the end, it's about showing someone after you're done and them going, ah, that feels really good. The same thing that they said at the beginning. That's really successful to me. And I think putting Post-its that were kind of arcane were there to make people think.
That's
great.
great.
There was this strange thing that happened with those Post-its when they first appeared. And I don't want to say it was a universal opinion, but at least through most of the people I spoke to, is that they appeared on the desk and everybody's like, I'm not sure about this. What's this? This is a bit odd. Like I don't really understand what that means, and it seems just a little bit kind of heady for my liking. And you'd leave it on your desk, you'd leave it stuck on there, and then you'd carry on working. And then like a week or two later, you'd think, oh, okay, maybe there's something there. And then you'd be walking home one day and you'd be like, I get it. And it's almost like he puts this little worm inside your brain, and it goes, I'm going to tell you some information, but you've got to work it out yourself.
That's my voice at work.
You have a bit of an English accent. That's what translates.
Yeah.
Don't get him to do his English accent.
Because it's important people understand it's not just about technique. It's about how you approach it. And the stand tall comment for India was the fact that India, as most of my animators on my team are particularly gifted. I got very lucky with the crew that I ended up having. But the whole thing is sometimes people are afraid to just let it out. Like I know a lot of great guitar players who know perfect technique, but they hold back because they don't want to play the wrong note, or they don't want to make the mistake, and because it'll stop them, and it's embarrassing, and it's it undermines your confidence as you're slowly trying to build it. But for me, I'm just like, let it go. Like that's the only way. And so stand tall meant just stand up and think about your choices and think carefully about your decisions, but then do them. And if they're not working, then we talk about it. So what,
Now, is that a personal thing that you've experienced, Ted, or is that because that's not an easy thing to do in anything? You have a martial arts background. I wrestled, and we've kind of talked about some of that stuff, and that relates to me.
Yeah.
In those fields, was that something you had to learn by experience, or was that natural? Because there's certain things that are kind of just natural to people. Some people are just naturally this, but was that something that you had to kind of experience yourself?
That's a good question. I think in martial arts and in 2D animation, it was always a lot of hard work, but it came much more easily to me.
Okay.
I felt I was very natural at those things. I think maybe this philosophy came from CG, because like we've talked about in the podcast before, I struggled with it when I came into it. And I think my CG literacy still, I feel a little insecure about it. But at the same time, I learned that there's no use in holding back, because what are you doing? Then you're showing a 50% mistake instead of a 100% mistake. So you're only solving half the problem all the time. Where does that get you? Nowhere. It actually can have the converse effect, where because you never really learn the whole solution, you're always wondering why it doesn't work. You're only fixing it halfway. So, you can't expect to ever fully understand a problem until you resolve the entire thing. And it means embarrassing yourself. I've asked a lot of people, including people on my crew, how to do things I didn't know how to do. But you know what? How are you going to learn them otherwise?
Yeah.
Get over the embarrassment. People will be like, okay, cool. And then you ask a couple of times, you write it down, and that's it. And then you know it.
See, that's why I love doing these podcasts. This is great. That's great.
I think it's really easy as well to add to that. I think it's really easy as an animator, especially when you're learning, to look at other students and people who are professionals and people who you idolize, and compare yourself to them all the time, and look at how can they do that and I can't do this, and why can't it be that person, and why am I this person? And I feel like, of course, there is a lot of learning that goes into creating ideas and coming up with something unique, and being aware of it. But as Ted said, I think the biggest hurdle for most people is, and why some people are initially stronger than other people, is that it's just about trying it and having, and not second guessing yourself all the time, and just making it happen. And that's the same, in any, in sport and in guitar playing, and if you don't afford yourself the opportunity to make mistakes and get things wrong, then the only thing you're going to do is you're going to get caught in cycles, and you're never going to grow, I think.
Yeah.
And your work is gonna look half baked.
Yeah.
Now, part of that though is, I know on your end, Ted, is creating that environment though where you can do that, because I'm sure there's environments that's not always easy to, like, you can make that mistake. Is that fair, guys?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I worked at a few already. my short time in this industry.
I don't know the environment. I can only perceive from my end on how I planned it, it's probably better to ask them how it ended up feeling. But I know that there also has to be ground rules that are established, because people need to know what direction to head in. And you go in and you say, look, I'm going to make sure, because the big thing, right, in Montreal is that people hop from studio to studio because there's not one that's structured enough that you could stay there for multiple films like at Disney or DreamWorks. And so everyone's looking to get a demo reel and then possibly bail at any time, because contract breach is not such a big deal in Montreal. Because, earlier on, now people are taking it more seriously, but early on, everyone's kind of touch and go, like between management and artists. So that's where it kind of grew from. But I tried to tell people, like, look, you're all going to get good shots from the start. Your demo reel will be filled in the first 2 months. And then what? What are you going to do? You have to really realize that everyone around you is getting equally good shots and equally so-so shots. And that really you're going to be shoulder to shoulder with these people for a little over a year. And after your demo reel is taken care of, then what are you going to worry about? You have to worry about the bigger picture, which is the film and each other ultimately. I know that sounds kind of heady, but like to foster an environment where people realize that they have nothing to worry about in terms of material on the reel, then people can emerge, because then they're not trying to hoard, or they're not trying to show off, or they're not trying to just look out for themselves in the best sense of the word in terms of survival. And all of a sudden you start lending what you understand to someone else when they might not. You might help someone shoot reference in the middle of, like, when you're, deep in the zone, someone needs help with reference and you're going to help them. And that ended up happening because, you know what, it's not just the structure of what I set up, but ultimately the people that ended up being there. That's the important thing, because I could, spout rules and my expectations, and if it's not the right people with like integrity that my crew had, it doesn't work. Like people who are very self-aware in terms of their behavior, their growth, just like I said, their integrity towards their art and themselves. That's like the key. That's really the key. And everyone really had that. I mean, Martin and India both, brought, but I'm going to pump their tires for a second here.
Okay.
And I think every one of my crew would agree. Martin and India brought beyond their, I think it's almost unfair to them because of this, but they brought such a positivity and an energy and a love for life to our crew, that without them, it literally would not have been the same.
That's awesome.
Like they've just brought this like energy and this sunshine. Sunshine's important in Montreal in the winter.
Yeah.
But the big thing that they're able to do as well is that and this speaks to them in terms of how they're balanced, is that they also brought such a high level of self-expectation. And they wanted so much, not just to do well for the film, but to live up to the best that they could be as an artist. And that's kind of not easy, because what does that mean? That means, okay, I want to achieve this environment, and my situation dictates that I can only achieve this. So you have to kind of dig inside and go, well, okay, this is my shot. The people who don't succeed as quickly are the ones who don't realize that at any given time, the shot that's under your nose is your chance. You have to get busy with making as many mistakes and flubbing up and working as hard as you can and learning as fast as possible, because you're not making it perfect with that shot under your nose. But you have to devote yourself to a long-term commitment of going, I'm going to apply as much energy as I can, as much focus and devotion into this shot under my nose, knowing that it might not be the greatest, but my goal is down the road. And this shot of like 3 feet gets me there. That's hard because it's draining. And it's really about the word commitment. You've got to go buying into, something that I have no idea is going to happen. But they were really shining examples of that.
That's fantastic.
Like they did not let off the gas and put themselves through a lot of stress. Like it's stressful to do that. It's stressful to go, I'm calling myself out and I want this. And it sounds kind of arrogant, but I want this and I got to achieve it. Okay, now what? You're going to lie in your bed and look at the ceiling and make it happen? No, you have to suck it up and go. And they really, really did.
That's fantastic.
And they really emerged. Just, between the beginning and the end of the film, their animation is just like elevated, and their professionalism. That's the other thing that a lot of people had to be taught too, like you have to be accountable and professional, but they're shining examples, and can't wait to have them back in Montreal.
That's fantastic.
Well, that's really kind of you to say, Ted, so thank you. I think as also, you can't say this on a podcast, but we're both blushing now. So.
I'm so warm right now.
So Scott, really, is it summer already?
But Larry, it's impossible to have a podcast that goes that long, but I have a story for every one of my animators. I kept a careful eye on them, as people and as artists to make sure that they stayed on track. And I wish I could tell you about all of them. They all have an equally amazing story of like evolution and growth.
We had such a wonderful team. We really did. Like I have like an affinity with everybody in that room, and I will happily call all of them a friend, but as long as they'll acknowledge me as one. Yeah, we there was definitely like I mean, I've never worked anywhere where, and I've worked at plenty of places where I've happily, you know, been happy to hang out and connect with people that are there, and they're friends with all sorts of people from those places. But I've never worked anywhere where I think the whole room, I could include all of those people as somebody who, you know, you'd happily go to the park with and have lunch. You'd happily go to their birthday party. You'd happily go to the Peruvian restaurant around the corner. Yeah. You'd have, like,
gotta mention Puka Puka.
Little shout out to Puka Puka.
So our Canadian friends are going, yes.
Yeah, and you know, here's the funny thing is that, you know, you look at these two, they're such humble people, and most of the crew, I mean, almost the entire crew is equally humble. But you know, here's the thing. As an animator who wants to be in feature animation, and equally in video games and TV, but I can't speak to that because I was not involved enough to know, so it's not fair for me to say, or well informed enough, you know, for me to say objectively. But as a feature animator, don't tell me that even the humblest animator, somewhere deep inside, deep inside, in a place that only they know, goes, I want to be the best animator there is. Right? No matter how humble you are, if you don't have that spark, you're not making it. Because it has to be that flagrantly arrogant to push you through something that's just a bunch of intangibles. Right?
Yeah.
But that statement is a philosophical statement and not a literal statement, because it speaks to the standard that you hold yourself to and the admiration of the level that others have achieved before you. And so I think that that's another thing that I would look for, is that deep inside, that little sparkle in their eye, that I know that's in there. Because that's gotta be. And these two have it, just, you know, and you can't tell because you'd never think of all the people, the humblest people in the world, but they've got it. They've got it, and they show it because, you know, their animation, as it went on more and more and more, it's got bite. You know, animation's got to have that bite. And because you're here to kick ass, don't pretend like that's what we're there to do. Like, you want to be the best, you have to kick ass like all the time. It sounds like such a frat boy thing to say, but you know, what's the difference in saying you want to achieve excellence every day? Yeah. But to me, I'm a little aggressive about it. I want my team because I picked the best team, and in the right way, like we talked about, but they all want it bad. And so I got lucky.
Okay. Another segue here, because I've had you as an instructor as well. And one of the things I probably would,
Larry.
No, that's, hey, I still have a video of a talk I think you gave me just afterwards on its own. I still have that. I have it saved as a one-on-one. So it's not a posted, it's in a video form. So I have mine. You know, but there's okay, I'm just throw this out there. There's an old Simpsons episode. I forget exactly what happens. Anyway, Bart says something to the effect of, "Yep, I'm tough but fair," you know? And that's kind of what I would see you as, Ted. You're tough, but you're fair. You take care of your own. You aren't just the drill sergeant that doesn't care. You are one who is tough in that regards. You expect a lot out of people, but there's that fair part where you're saying, here, look, I wasn't just going out and looking at the top of the line demo reel. I was looking for character as well. And that's the part I absolutely love. But the segue here I'm looking at is, from your vantage point, this is a new position for you as an animation director. How did you get that high excellency for this film out of these guys that were maybe a little bit more green than maybe say some of the artists in LA, but still able to be patient in that regards? Yeah. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay.
And yeah, because really the most senior person had 3 features, which is like a baby to me,
And it was a new job for you too, Ted. So every like
it
on all
was, yeah.
levels.
Yeah, I was, yeah, just for the record, I was terrified. Yeah, it's scary. Like, and you know, it didn't hit me when I walked into the studio. Of all the things, you never know when you're going to feel a certain way. And it was right as I walked up to customs, moving back to Canada, customs and immigration, that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real, you know, and then it really hits you. But, you know what? I think I approached it in the sense that, okay, I've never been an animation director, but I have seen how a lot of them work. And before I left DreamWorks, I went to each and every HOCA, which is head of character animation, which is animation director at DreamWorks, and I asked them questions, and I gathered up and tried to average out what they were saying to me. I asked them, what would you do better, and what do you think you did well? That's why I asked each one of them. And everyone gave me a huge range of advice. And so I tried, that was the only thing I had to go on. And I said, well, you know what? This isn't something I wouldn't think about if I weren't just an animator. And so I approached it really from the vantage point of what environment would I like to be in? What environment would I not like to be in? Because everyone wants to be good, and everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to feel like they're contributing. Everyone wants to learn, and whether people realize it or not, no matter how stubborn you are, part of you wants to be called out for the things you do wrong and for behaving like a brat. And other times being patted on the back for being a person, a stand-up person, and for doing great work. And, you know, if I could list all my animators and I were to give you a rating of 1 to 10 on their ability, that would be one measure, right? I could rank them on a chart for you. It'd be tight, but I could rank them. But you know what? The list that's almost equally important to me is a growth chart, right? Because at Cal Arts, when I taught there, we had something called the producer show, and it was like the very best films made the producer show, and as the industry came to look at them. And sometimes, I mean, obviously they deserve it. Every artist who made producer show deserved it. But I wish there was a show for the people who went through so much difficulty and struggle and were really brave by like fighting their own insecurities and fears and ended up improving the most. And if I could give you a growth chart, that would be the insane one to look at on Ballerina. And that's the one that's important to me, because growth in animation only comes through growth of character. You cannot separate the two. You can say, well, isn't it mostly technical? Of course it needs to be technical. But you know, to struggle through and break through barriers, your hands are always going to work. Once you know Maya, you're going to know it. You know, but what makes those hands do something more? It's not just your brain that puts things together. It's your heart. Like, what kind of guts do you have? How much are you going to just endure to make it through? And my crew, like, I put them up against the best crew in the world. They are tough. Like, there's a grit factor that existed on my crew. It doesn't exist anywhere else. They're gritty because, you know what? We don't have like free food, and we don't have massages, and we don't have, you know, free everything. The amenities are there to put an artist at ease so they have less to worry about. We didn't have that luxury.
Right.
There was a lot of cake.
Well, we had we'll talk about it at the end, like all tons of weight. There's constant sweets and cookies and cakes being brought into the room. We made treats for ourselves, but no, I mean, some gutsy animators.
Yeah, and I think the support, and at least like on an individual level, like my own experience is that it's a studio where they have empathy with the artists. Like, you know, if you're going through a rough patch at home or whatever it is, or maybe just in your work, or, you know, the support network is there to, you know, the team are there to pick up that person and make sure they're okay. And also production understand too. They're not like, well, you haven't done your work, so either pick it up or go away. You know, and there's that pressure of like, if something out of your hands does go wrong, you know that you've got that network there that you're not going to be completely screwed over by, because you know the support was all there with everyone at every level. You know, like with Marion and the production side, and then you know the colleagues that are sitting next to you going, it's all right, you know, keep going.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I'm sorry, Martin. Go ahead.
No. I was just going to say briefly that we should flag up Marion, who was our production coordinator, who was an absolute legend from start to finish. She quite often be the last person to leave, first person there in the morning. She made sure everybody had the right shots, had the right things, everything they needed, and all you had to do was sit down and animate. And everybody should have Marion.
My hero. You know, she's a remarkable person. She had worked on films like Asterix in Belgium, and the thing about Marion is that she has an incredible production side where she knows exactly what needs to get done when. But we worked so well together. In fact, she was a lot more production minded at the start, and she didn't get how I wanted to do things because it was really different. But then she got to understand me, and I got to understand her, and I have the utmost respect, because without her, this film doesn't get done on time, finished on time. But, you know, that's the thing. It's that, you know, the management can be understanding of individual cases of difficulty, personal difficulty, because the animators earned it for themselves. Because you know what, when you deliver, people give you slack. When you do things when you say you're going to, your people are going to cut you some slack because you delivered. You know, so it has to go both ways. But Marion was fantastic in keeping things together, and you know, we spent a lot of hours planning how things were going to go and talking about how it was for certain animators to know when to back off or to give more work or to help people out. If someone wasn't hitting their numbers, we have someone who's really flowing take over some of their shots, but give the footage to the other person. Because we didn't really look at those numbers overall. We just looked at overall speed and what we were giving people to do. But yeah, really, Marion, chapeau, we would say. Marion.
Okay, now, how did you divvy out shots, Ted? Because you mentioned a lot of these.
Tallest people, best shots.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shortest people, worse shots.
That seems fair.
Next question.
That seems fair.
That's why my post-it note says stand tall.
Exactly.
You're too small.
No, everyone gets good shots. That's the key.
You mentioned that a lot of these people you hadn't known as much in regards to some of their footage or their reels and things like that.
Yeah.
But you know, you also mentioned to a large degree you were taking a gamble, period, basing off of their character here. But yeah, how did you? Was it just something that's sort of developing as you can kind of see someone's weaknesses or strengths, or? No,
you know, I just had to go for it.
Okay.
Because I had one shot of, like, management was just waiting on me. No one knew me. The whole studio, everyone was new. And so they're just kind of like, okay, well, we'll take him at his word. Let's see if he comes through. And the biggest risk that I took was at the beginning, because I clearly know Martin's work, India's work, Roy Stein's work, some other people on the crew, a couple of people that I know. Do I give them the good shots just to cover my back and then slowly give people better shots as I see their work? That's the logical thing to do. I don't know. Screw that.
Let's jump in this.
Well, you know what? Like, how? I guess it's my right and it's my job to do that. You know, to kind of say, okay, well, I'm relegating you to this pile and you to this pile. And you know what? Here's the truth. Once you do that, no one really leaves that pile. Philosophically, the fact that you've decided to put them there means that something in you fundamentally believes they belong there all the time. And I wasn't willing to do that. These are artists who are hungry, and animation can be taught, but you won't get better unless you want to get better. So for me, it's like, you have my trust to lose. You don't need to gain it. And I think that's the only way. But the big risk is that some people don't deliver, and production says you're not delivering, and then they crack down on you, and then you don't have any leeway. But you know what? It's like, I'm like, everyone, you get good stuff. If you don't understand something, you've got the support. You could screw up and come to me, and it's cool. You have nothing to worry about. We're going to make it better. No one's going to be killing it the first 2 months. We're getting used to everything. The rigs are broken, etc. And so everything's a learning process. It's bumpy, but we're going to do it together. We're going to rise and succeed together, or we're all going to fail together.
And I do think as well, I think there's not an awful lot in the film that's your stereotypical B shots. I think there are shots that aren't as intense, but they're still difficult ones to get right. I don't think there's any shots in there that really you could give to somebody and just kind of let them get on with it, and they'll do a good job. And there's no doubt about that one. Like it's all stuff that needs an extra level of care and attention to make it right. So I think that's.
But that's logic, though. The thing is, I've been at studios, I've been on shows where that's exactly the case. So 5 animators get all those shots, and they get stockpiled for them. And others deal with the dregs. And that experience guaranteed me that I was never going to do that to someone else.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, Martin, in India, what were some of the things that you learned during this movie here, this film?
Not to eat too much Canadian food. Oh, sorry, go on.
I just said how to animate.
Yeah.
How to animate a bit more.
A bit more.
Thank you.
Than before. I don't know how to completely animate yet. That would be a sweeping statement. Sorry.
You know, I'm sure you go from one to another, one movie to another, and it's always kind of one of those things I think about. Okay, what did I learn on this? What am I now taking on my next journey here that I learned during that?
So for me, like I'd only done TV and some VFX work before I did this project, and I'd done some character work in iAnimate, obviously, and personal shots, but it was the first time that I'd ever done it in feature animation, and it was hard at the start, especially. It was like, I probably shouldn't be here. I should have stayed at home. This is so difficult. Yeah.
I remember turning to Martin because we happened to sit next to each other, which was either maybe not a great choice or was a great choice. I don't know.
Just to clarify that, we're together, so
yes,
we'd walk to work together, and then we'd sit next to each other, and then we'd go home together. And India didn't kill me. So.
But I remember turning to Martin, and I think maybe not the first day, because the first day you're just settling in. When we first got our shots cast to us, I just whispered to Martin, like, "Oh no." Well, I think we should. I think we're imposters. Like, how did we get here? just watching the animatic going, okay.
Yeah. And it was yeah. I mean, that's the thing as well, is you've just got to you're there. You've got to try. You've got to get stuck in. And I think it's one of those. I think there's definitely animators who envision themselves at a studio working on feature animation and think, oh, I'll go there and I'll be great and it won't be a problem. But I think for most people, there's like this nagging self-doubt of like, well, when I get there, like everybody's gonna realize that I'm and I think that on the majority, most studios are aware that, especially if it's your first feature, that you can't come in and be the best you can be on day one. You need a time to settle in, and we were afforded that, and it took me time to get up to speed. But by the end of the project, like it was night and day. Like I look at some of the early shots I did, and I'm like, oh, you could have done a better job at that. But it was as good as I could manage at the time. But by the end, like I felt much more confident and much happier with my results. So
you're going to end up eating like 8% of quality of shots in the movie, because if you're going to give everyone a crack at it at the beginning, you don't know. Like I didn't know, but so I accepted that the quality was going to be less in the first couple of months, but that would only amount to like 5% in the film. but then I'd have an entire team of people who felt confident and trusted, so I could give any one of them great shots, even better shots later.
Mm. Now, what were some of the biggest hurdles for you guys, this being kind of your first feature, that you initially hit up front? Because you mentioned, obviously, that was things starting picking up there, but what were some of the first things that you struggled with initially?
I think for me anyway, it was getting, I can't remember what they called it. I think it might have been like red mist or something. During like shooting, like we did quite intense reference to make sure we had the best shot at the shot, because you want the most amount of time you can spend on it. So, you know, if we had a two-person character shot or whatever, you know, you'd pick the people from the team that you would think would be great for the shot, if it was yourself or whoever, and you take them into the reference room or yourself into the reference room. And if it was me on my own shooting reference, I at the very beginning of the project, I was very not uncomfortable with doing it, but I get very frustrated very quickly by it, because I'm like, I can't hit that note, I can't hit that beat or whatever it is. That's sort of probably part of that, if it's wrong we can fix it type thing. And Ted was saying that there's no reason to get so frustrated by it. You know, you just try again, and if you don't get it, we'll find another way of getting it. And by the end of the project, I found it a lot easier to go in there and just shoot some reference and be like, oh yeah, I think this is the right choice for this particular piece of acting.
So just getting more comfortable with yourself, with the show, just that comfort.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that was a big thing. More so, like, I guess confidence thing rather than necessarily like mechanics, as it were, or stuff like that. But that's obviously a whole other thing. But yeah, I think overcoming, getting okay with not hitting the right beat in the reference to start with, and playing and experimenting was a big thing for me.
What about you, Martin?
Yeah, I think India's touched on it a bit, but the confidence really but universally, like having the confidence to make the right choices and to make the mistakes, and the first choice, idea that you have doesn't always have to be the right idea, and that you need to collaborate with people, and you need to talk to people, and you can't just lock yourself in a bubble and just expect to come up with the best shot on your own, because it's a collaborative process. And you know, I mean, even at iAnimate, the process that you have with the tutor, or in some cases your classmates, that helps you dig into your shots. But yeah, I think being more open to that and engaging with it, I think was one of the things that really stuck out to me earlier on that helped. So.
Let's try to transition now to maybe particularly about the movie here. I was watching the trailer here, Ballerina, or Leap here as it's going to be in the U.S. Do we have a date for the U.S.?
March the 3rd.
All right. Very cool. So not too long here, huh? Now, it's been showing elsewhere, though, because I noticed on the trailer it showed Christmas. So where is it shown so far?
Okay, well, why don't you talk about something and I'll bring up the list. I'll try and find it here.
It's been out in the UK just before Christmas.
Okay.
So Martin and I took the mums.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool.
It was wonderful. Like, I mean, it's a story that I've heard from a lot of old school friends and people that I used to know that I used to know, still know, obviously. I can't, because they wouldn't have told me if I used to know them. But especially their younger children have gone to see the film and then have been dancing in the aisles and gone home and dressed up in their ballet outfits, and so it struck a chord with them so strongly. And I'd heard these stories, and we'd heard these stories, and we're like, oh, that's really cute. I like the idea of it. And we went and saw the film with the mums, and the lights came on, and in the cinema, and there was just a group of girls at the bottom just doing their twirls and doing their stretches, but slightly embarrassingly in that screening, my mum. I don't think I'd been to the cinema to see any of the projects that I'd worked on before with her, so I think this might have been the first time. And she's sitting there in the screen, and there's India's mum, my mum, and India, and she sits down and she turns to the person next to her and she says, "My son worked on this film." And the person's like, "Oh, my son and his girlfriend is just they're both sat over there." And the man's like, "Oh, well, congratulations." I don't think he was quite sure what to say. And then later on, she leans.
She proceeded to tell everyone.
Everybody. The whole cinema.
The cleaner, the girl that we got the ticket from.
She was chatting to one girl for what seemed like an incredibly long amount of time, and I could see the girl was being very nice and courteous, but
they were proud.
Rescue her. Yeah, it was really.
They were
cute.
proud of you guys.
Yeah.
So by the way, I have the list for you here.
Yeah.
So it's released so far in Belgium, Switzerland, Netherlands, Bolivia, the UK, France, Venezuela, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Bulgaria, Ecuador, Mexico, Lithuania, Argentina, Uruguay, Estonia, Poland, Russia. Russia not yet. Russia's the 26th of January. And it's going to release in Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Peru, Latvia, Slovakia, Germany, Spain, Czech Republic, Romania, Israel, Portugal, Turkey, Italy, China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, South Korea, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Hungary, Greece, Middle East, US of A.
That is awesome. That is awesome.
You can take a breath now.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
That's a lot.
Ted's going to visit all of them.
That's an awful lot. I'm going to all the premieres on my own bill, and I'm going to see if I could learn Lithuanian.
It's a simple language.
I noticed on some of the stuff I think you had posted socially, or maybe I just saw socially, that I thought was really cool was just that they had, maybe for some of the premieres, they had some of the people who did ballet come out and walk people to their seats and do a little something beforehand. Can you tell me a little bit about that, Ted?
Yeah, it was beautiful. They just had some little ballerinas come out and do a show prior to the screening, and Orly Dupont was there, and Jeremy Bellingard. It was really great. It was really nice.
That's very cool.
I have some interesting news about China if you'd like to hear it. This is an exclusive for you.
Yeah.
So we're releasing Ballerina on February 1st in China on 6,600 screens.
Wow.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's a lot.
And it's the first foreign movie ever to be allowed a release during the Chinese New Year.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
very, very cool. Of screens. And we're very, very grateful to our Chinese partners because they really did an absolutely fantastic job getting a lot of partners and support involved. So yeah, we're hoping for success there.
Awesome. That's awesome. Congratulations.
1.8 million entries in France.
Very cool.
Entries as opposed to total box office. So it's the number of viewers that go.
Okay.
A successful number would have been 1.5 to 2, and we're at 1.8 right now. But given the fact that we opened against Rogue One and the second or third week of Moana in its third week in France had 750,000 entries, and we've still done 1.8. So we're quite happy with that.
Very cool.
6 or 7 million pounds in the UK.
Very cool.
So we're doing okay. We're very happy.
That was just us. That was just us and our mums.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks to Martin and India and their mums.
Their mums helping sell the movie for the audience there. That's awesome. Now, was this Latier's first full feature, or?
It is first anything.
Yeah, man, what a way to kind of go out. That is awesome.
It's a good studio. There's so many passionate people, not just, we're speaking about animation, but briefly, like every single department, everyone had to wear a lot of hats. I think the one thing that I could have done better at was being more available for my animators. I think they needed me more from day to day. I did as well as I could, but they needed me in a lot of different capacities at the studio as other supervisors were demanded of. But, everyone, this sounds like name dropping, but it's just respect, like Benoit and Nahas and Gregory and Chloe and all these people every day who just were like the glue management, who did all kinds of jobs. And it was amazing experience. Everyone was just like You know, it's not like it didn't have its drama and its speed bumps and its hiccups. Sure, we had plenty of those, but you know what? Like, it always end up resolving for the best. So
that's cool, because I've talked with people who are not as familiar with animation and kind of what we do. And when they start realizing how long it takes to do certain things, or how long something is, I said, yeah, go watch, after you watch the movie, go look at the credits, you know, and you'll see that. And they're like, yeah, I know, but they don't notice that. They watch the movie, it's like, great, you know, and they loved it or whatever, but they don't realize. And all of a sudden you start realizing all those names on there. That's what it took to make that film there.
Yeah, and the producers really engendered that confidence, you know, like Laurent Zaitun and Yan Zanu are two guys who, well, actually there's a third producer who was involved, and they have a company in France called Quad. Nicolas Duval is his name, by the way. And it's really funny because when I interviewed with them, they had never mentioned that they'd done a film called Les Intouchables, The Untouchables. And they made it for like 16 million euro. And it ended up making 447 million US dollars. When I interviewed them, they never mentioned that. I should have done my homework well enough. I was in a hurry and I didn't do thorough enough work. But those two guys actually set the tone for everyone else. Yeah. Like, they're just like behind the scenes, super passionate. Laurent actually really had dictated the writing and the direction for the film. And they just never take any credit for it. You know,
so they were so accessible as well. They were so engaging, and like I've done the VFX thing, and you don't see the people that who you're making a movie for. They're so far removed from you that they're like this. They're like whispers in the wind. Whereas like Yan and Laurent would be around all the time, and you know, if you had questions for them or you engage in such like warm and welcoming people, you never felt like you were just like a cog. You always felt like you were part of their team.
And talk about commitment. They're like, okay, we've never done an animated feature. Let's start a studio and move from France. Maybe it'll work out. I don't like that's pretty ballsy to me.
But I think also, and Ted probably won't mention this because he's so modest. But there was a great they were really in sync. Like Yan and Laurent and Ted had a real kind of great chemistry, and I think part of the reason that we didn't have the budget of some of the bigger studios, so there was only a certain amount of time we had to do what we could do, and because they were so in tune with each other, and because they were so close in a lot of ways, it meant that there wasn't those 18 tiers of like people for ideas, for approvals to go through. It was Ted and then Yan and Laurent, and usually they were on the same page because they were so in sync, and that made things a lot easier for us on the whole. So
very cool.
Yeah, you know, we Larry, this is a funny insider thing about the studio. If you want to know this, it frustrated some people and not others, and I understand why. But we didn't have a conventional dailies.
Really?
Everyone was in there and everyone sat and everyone looked at their shots with all these people, because it actually was an accident, because the producers were in France for like 6 months of the production, gathering up everything to move over. And so basically I would go through shots with him prior, because we couldn't have everyone in there on Skype, because we know how well that works at our studio. And then so they would end up giving the notes to me, and I would give them to the animators one by one. But by the time they moved over, we're like, this works really well. You know, and I would just make sure to launch the shots clearly, and then I would approve the shots with the animators after Laurent looked at them, and Yan. And the beauty of that is that if you like the system, you never had to stress about any reinterpretation or getting notes or talking to the directors or whatever. If you are one of those people that loves dailies and loves interacting with the directors, it wasn't a show for you. But I think if I had my way, I would keep it this way, because it just allows animators to animate and not use a lot of their time going to sit down, but then you avoid the weird kind of, some people aren't great communicators and other people get awkward. And if two people don't communicate well, there's misinterpretation. Then it's an additional thing that gets in the way of you being creative. I know not everyone was a fan of this system. Like, for a fact, I know there's people on the animation team that would maybe not come back because it's not the system. But it works best. It worked great.
That's neat.
Yeah.
I love the idea of willing to try something that's not, hey, well, that's just because that's how we've always done it. You know?
Yeah.
Where did the story come from?
Well, it was co-written by my producer and a writer named Carol Noble,
Okay.
who is super wonderful English woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the initial pass, I had to change a lot of English terms to American terms. Then Laurent and Carol took up to rewriting, as you know, every feature does. And it just evolved that way. So Laurent had a huge part of it. And then I was allowed to be in script rewrites and revisions, and I got to know the characters better that way.
Okay. Because, one of the reasons I ask is just ballet is in, I guess, maybe not as popular maybe here in the U.S. per se, at least in some of the fields that I've been in. And like I said, I'm one of three boys. But, I've got boys now, I've got girls myself. So that might be just a different perspective for me. But as you were kind of mentioning all these countries where it's at, I can go, okay, I can see where the popularity, particularly for a story like this. But then just as you mentioned, all these girls kind of going out there and dancing, it kind of gave me that reminiscence of what Frozen kind of did, where it was just that singing the song and, that empathy right away. And so I can really see where this movie here particularly will do well. Even though I think kind of in some ways transcends whether you're in ballet or not, just that idea of dancing and song. And so what were some of the things that for this story that kind of hooked you guys?
I think it's also, like I'd say, is beyond that, I think obviously it's natural for a lot of the marketing stuff to lean heavily on the ballet, but I think there's a lot more to the story beyond that I know friends who've seen it who definitely don't like ballet, and they really enjoyed it. So I think
my dad cried about 3 times. He loved
got
it.
hard.
But
Cool.
I think the dancing is more like their medium of expressing their emotions, right? Like how we animate, but it's not the genre,
Right.
But I guess it's easy to, like Martin said, easy to fall on that sort of stereotypical demographic to advertise to, I guess, for if a business wants to make money, I guess that's, but yeah, there's a lot more. Actually, in fact, when we watched it, because I think we'd only maybe watched the whole thing once as a team at L'Atelier on a sort of like Friday beers, like, oh, we finished animation, let's play it.
it's a fun screening as well.
Yeah, everyone's just basically quoting the whole film and cheering at people's shots.
Cheering at other people's shots.
Yeah. So we hadn't watched, and also then it was, some of it was rendered, some of it was just play blasts and all that sort of thing. So when we went to see it, in my head, I had an impression of like Victor, one of the characters. I was like, oh, he'll probably play out, he'll be funny, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I watched it and I was like, actually, I think he's maybe my favorite character. Like, there's something about his arc through the film, even though he's not the main character. It's just, it gave me a different impression of the film. Like, I don't know if my brain had already assumed, ballet, the main character's a girl. And it's similar, I guess, to a lot of people. But yeah, the male characters in there are not to be undermined, I don't think.
That's great.
There's a really, really awesome postman who deserves his own movie.
What's that?
There's a guy that pops up for about 5 shots, and he's the postman who delivers a letter that moves the story forward. But he's deserving of his own spin-off movie. It's very charismatic and unique.
You did all of those shots, right? Didn't you, Martin? Oh,
I did one of them. I think
David
Room.
Yeah.
I did one, but there was a longer one that I did.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I did the reference for all of it. Maybe.
Yeah.
All the lip sync and stuff is in English.
It is correct.
Okay.
It's all done in English. Correct.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Although they've added Harvey Weinstein for the U.S. versions, adding some things that I'm not sure what he's adding. So there might be some surprises that I don't know about. But
Okay.
one of the voice actors is like, she called me and she's like, hey, I'm doing some new tracks. I'm like, oh, you are? She's like, you didn't know? I'm like, no, but it's okay. You know, Harvey does what he does best and he does it well. So, you know.
As long as they don't turn Felicia into like De Niro or something.
Yeah, no, actually there's a couple of cool things. One voice that was changed, which I think is a very funny choice, and a character where it won't really make that big of a difference, but I think that'll be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things I noticed last night when I checked out the trailer to refresh my memory, obviously a lot of mechanics. Looked good though. It looked really, really good. What was some of the strengths and hurdles that you kind of came across making sure that those were nailed down, Ted?
Well, here's the thing is that you're having just come from DreamWorks and Disney and the whole history of wanting to make it the very best possible.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing is that, you know, you have to decide where you want to set your level. And for me, I wanted the dancing and of course overall animation, but since it's a movie about dance, largely, I wanted the dance to be able to be scrutinized, not just by Disney and DreamWorks and Pixar animators, and to be, you know, just flawless, but by Orly Dupont and ballerinas, to be able to like still frame and look for mistakes and not find any. But after you decide that you want to be there, then you have to kind of go, okay, well, if Orly Dupont is going to do, who's now director of the opera there, and for those who don't understand, the Palais Garnier or the Paris National Opera, they're all the same thing, and that's like the ballet dance school. That's a French style exists there. It emanated from there. But if Orly Dupont is going to do your reference, it's perfect. But we're not here to rotoscope. But if you don't, and I was really racking my brain. That's the first thing I'm going to think of, right? Because the dancing has to be great and convincing, but you don't want to copy stuff. Because animators can copy a reference quite easily, but that's any animator who's had some experience realizes that reference becomes really just an assurance of the right intention. And then you push and you pull from there, you know? It's really not copying at all. But I sat down with Orly and I said, well, look, I have no idea how to do this because I want to make it perfect for you and technically accurate, but I don't know how to do that without making it'll come out stiffer in animation, you know? And I think I mentioned this before somewhere else, but she says she laughed and she's just like this elegant, beautiful, talented, supremely capable woman, and she leans over and she puts her hand on my arm. She goes, no, you don't need to worry. I don't want you to animate like I dance. I want you to animate like I dream of dancing.
Oh, that's cool.
I'm like, I don't know what that means. It sounds really hard, and you know, inside and outside, I'm like, yeah, no problem.
Ted got given one of his own post-it notes.
Oh my, I posted note on my own head. Quit. But I think for me that meant a lot because it was her trust that we would figure it out, that she trusted me to do what I do best. And then you just had to search in the script, you know, and make sure that you understood what drove our main character, Felicie, and what drives her opponent, quote unquote, Camille. And the basic difference is one is driven completely by her heart, and one is being driven completely by something that's been placed upon her, an expectation. And certainly you can never put up someone who's had tons of training against a newbie and possibly think you can be better just on the technical basis. So there has to be more. What people don't understand is that there's a lot of dancing that we half made up on our own. I mean, Orly did tons of reference for us, but Felicie comes from the country and she dances a lot in her Breton dancing, her country dancing. And a lot of that was done, like choreographed for us.
That's awesome.
A lot of it wasn't. And so it was us learning to have a couple of extra fouettes when she's dancing ballet, a couple extra turns, a little more hang time on a jump, a pose push a little bit more in the right places to make it seem like the next generation of dancer. You see athletes nowadays, they're doing the exact same things they were 20 years ago, but they're faster and stronger and doing things they couldn't, like, you know, athletes, the best of the generation 20 years ago would never have thought of doing. It's just natural growth, I think. We tried to put that in the characters. I hope we did a good job. I think we did a good job.
That's very cool.
One of my favorite film critics, a guy called Mark Commode over here.
I like that guy now.
Yeah, he's your new favorite film critic as well. His opinions are normally pretty close to mine, and he says
he's also usually very cut and dry.
Yeah,
like he'll just say like, "Oh no, it just doesn't work," or he'll say,
rubbish.
"Yeah,
don't go see this film."
And he gave a positive.
He really enjoyed Ballerina. I think he said that the thing that really stuck out for him, the thing that really captured him was the dance, was how well done, and how much heft it had. I think was the word he used.
How funny.
Yeah. So I think it's a testament to the team, and the stuff that came out in those sequences. It looks really beautiful.
So Ballerina for the most of the world here, but I think in the U.S. it's going to be Leap, right?
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure for our audience.
Which is not a bad name. Could have been worse.
Well, no, when I watched the trailer again, it says something about taking that leap, and so all of a sudden, now knowing the U.S. name, it made sense, and so I can see where it does definitely work.
Yeah, I think it's going to remain Ballerina in Canada because the distributor is E1 here, the same as in the UK. So I think they didn't have any problem with the numbers in the UK, so they're going to keep it.
Keep it that. Now, Ted, anim director, obviously you said you wore many hats. Was there, I'm assuming there was a lot of roles that you were less familiar with versus being in the production at Disney and DreamWorks there. So it seems like you're now having to learn a lot of these new terms and outlets and stuff like that. Was that a big role that you had to kind of get around to?
I didn't expect it, to be honest. I just thought I would arrive and be compartmentalized like at Disney and DreamWorks. So you just do your job every day and you go home and you just do your best at that. But again, Laurent and Yan put a lot of faith in me, and they never once said like, "Oh, we know everything." They're the first to kind of say, "We don't know this, help us." And it was a mentorship both ways. I think they learned about animation, and I learned a lot about what it takes to run a studio the right way. And the funny thing is Laurent was so involved. The guy is that guy should be a movie director. He made so many weirdly acute calls on the acting, and his instincts are so strong. He's a bit of a genius at it. He doesn't even know it. And he's so busy being a producer, and that's what he does best. Him and Yan are like this whirlwind of activity, constantly doing all these things and balancing their great family life and being great dads and husbands and running the studio. So I think most people stood back and kind of just admired them from afar as to how capable and, like Martin said, warm and kind they remained, like genuinely. But they were very gracious in allowing me to be closer to them and learning that side of the business and how to really keep that integrated with our artistic goals.
That's neat.
They always, pushing character and personality and relationships and emotions. That's what it's about.
And that's one of the things that I'm really just kind of enjoying about maybe where we're at in this industry. And this is not in comparison to Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, or anything along that lines. But I love the venue that you guys have been able to have in a smaller studio. There's pros and cons, obviously. I love a lot of the work that comes out of Blur Studios down in, I think, Santa Monica. And one of the things that the CEO there mentioned was just that they're not a specialist studio. They have to wear many different hats. And one of the pros was that you have a little bit more ownership because it's not just something that you're doing and kind of handing off here. And so it seems that's kind of the same boat that you're in there with the smaller studio. And I say smaller, I mean, you said you had 30 animators, I guess smaller in regards to maybe budget per se.
Yes.
You had to wear multiple hats there, but there seems to be that pro though, that as you mentioned, even in regards to the dailies, there's things that you're able to kind of cut out and be a little more efficient on than maybe some of the bigger studios.
Yeah, it's like there's good and bad things in every studio, right? Because basically, if you look from the top down, you have Yen, who's the financial genius who has an artistic eye. You have Laurent, who's the artistic genius who has like a financial eye. Like those two guys, and then that trickles down through the management, and then the management team who are artistic as well, and they wear a bunch of hats. And we don't have the luxury of things. So we don't have like our budget was probably the opening sequence for Moana. Like, no kidding. That's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone was very realistic, but instead of taking the view of like, oh, well, we only have this much, we're like, well, we have this much. Let's squeeze every penny out of it. But everyone there's no room for lack of communication or honesty. And that was the great thing. It was give and take, like from my end, that the animators didn't see every day. It's a constant bargaining and trust with other departments. So if Benoit, who's the CG soup, said, hey, look, this stuff that you're doing, we can't do it because it'll result in this later. And I see that proportionately it's more important to him and it's more essential for the film for him to have his way than my way, then he gets his way. Because later on, respect begets respect, and consideration begets consideration. And later on, if I'm like, Ben, I really need this, he's like, okay, it's tough, but you got it. But that's the way it goes. And it's not you scratch my back, I scratch yours. That's a lot more self-interested. It's always us with the biggest hat, which is like, what's best for the film. It sounds like this weird utopic thing. It was very painful along the way, but everyone bought into that.
That's cool.
And that's what made it work.
It really looks like it doesn't look like a film with the budget that we had.
That's exactly what I was just going to say.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, you would be forgiven in thinking that it was a much larger budget, and the way that the stuff that lighting that comp did, and
beautiful.
The way that some of those sequences are just absolutely stunning, especially on the big screen.
Yeah.
And so make sure you go and see it in the cinema, everybody.
That's right.
Please
Absolutely.
see it, everyone.
Yes.
Times.
You will not be disappointed, I'm sure.
No.
But that's what I was actually saying as well. The lighting is beautiful. The look of it is great. The animation, obviously top notch.
Thank you.
You would not, at least from the trailer that I'm looking at here, you wouldn't think it's a 1-to-1 in regards to budget for sure. It
so much.
Holds up and it looks very, very beautiful. And that's why I guess it's just I like. That's why I said it's not in comparison to any other companies, but it's just neat to be able to see companies. I know that's what Jason's doing up there with Cinesight and the movies that he's going. He's been in Disney and DreamWorks for a long time, and he's been able to see some of the things that he liked and some of the things that he feels that they can do better there on a smaller budget and be more efficient. And I'm sure that was kind of the same boat for you guys here, and still be able to produce something that's just absolutely looks beautiful.
Thank you. It's really in the approach, right, Larry? Because you can think of it one of two ways. You can go, we're a studio that makes cool movies for X budget. Or you can say we have X budget, but we make cool movies. One of them puts the fact that you're a bargain studio first, and another one says that we're doing the best with what we have, but the best that we can do is far exceeds what we have financially. Yeah. And I think that's what we are, because we always put the artistic foot first. Because, after people see this film, I've yet to hear someone go, not bad for X amount of dollars.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And instead of going like, wow, that's great. And when they don't mention budget, that's what you want.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can measure how much we had by the bags under our eyes.
Don't look at mine. Although we didn't work late nights, let me.
No.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I want to point that out.
Neat.
It finished on time.
Fantastic.
Every day.
Except for me.
Well, yes. Sorry, Tim.
That's why you get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
But I also think that what's the word? I'm not going to say it correct now. The accessibility of the studio. Like if you put another studio where all the departments were locked off from one another, and L'Atelier, where, you know, it's fine to go and walk to another department and say, oh, I've got a problem with this, or hey, can I get some help with this, or whatever it is. And I think you would just not have the same movie, because the studio where everything's locked off and it's very rigid, and, you know, you can only get a change if it's approved by however many emails you've sent or whatever it is. I just don't think it would ever get finished, at least if it did, it probably wouldn't be to anywhere near the standard, I don't think.
There's always going to be some level of politics in any studio, in any situation where there are multiple people involved and there are different personalities. But the overall lack of friction that we experience there, say with other departments and internally with our leads, who are all wonderful, might I add, was nothing that I've experienced before, and I suspect probably nothing I will experience for a while again. Like there's nothing. It was, as India said, so easy to get help from people outside of the department, to get things changed, to get things pushed through. And I've been in studios that have been smaller, and you have to fight tooth and nail just to get like an extra controller added to a rig or something, or one of your shots looks a bit strange now that it's gone outside of the department, and you wanted to flag up, and any of those things that it's totally gone from your wheelhouse, and in most cases. But with us there on Ballerina, it never felt like there was resistance when it was within reason. So I always appreciate that.
By the same token, we were lucky to actually have our own room for animation. That, you know, people, I don't know,
keep the noise down.
Yeah, but keep the noise down. And actually, strangely enough, most of the time people would come in and be shocked that it's like church quiet with just mice clicking most of the time. People came to do business and do it well, but we had fun too. And I think a lot of people just felt like it was our sanctum, which it was. Let's be honest. You know, it was our own dojo, our own private space, and that room still's got magic in it.
Yeah, the comment I was going to say is just the, I guess, maturity that I'm hearing from in regards to what you guys had kind of set up. I would never expected that this was the first film.
Me neither.
Yeah, it seems like the way you guys have nailed things down and the flow of it, it just seemed like this is like third, fourth, fifth film. We started with a complete script. That was the key. We had the script locked down. I mean, of course, things evolve and get rewritten and change. But that was the big key. We didn't start production until the script was done, more or less. Now, how much did you have input in regards to the pipeline? Because you said this
very little, because I arrived when like pipeline was already pretty set for a year. It was being developed, and there was a change in rigging personnel, and so it resulted in rigs that were begun under a different philosophy that changed, and so the rigs weren't as cooperative as we needed initially, but that changed over. We had a new head of rigging that solved a lot of our issues for us. Brilliant guy, Bruno Blanc. Not to say the past one was not, but it's just different philosophically. It was really pretty ironed out, and that's the only thing I regret, that for myself there wasn't enough pre-production animation time. But then you just kind of have to just suck it up and go, right? Like you need to do your best. It was just so exciting, Larry. Like I can't tell you, it was the most daunting endeavor I think I've ever undertaken. And we had a wall where we had all our sequences that were in progress or done or whatever, just started. And about 2 months in, that nothing changed. And I was like, well, seemingly, you know, so little had been done that I'm like, how's this going to happen? And now it's like out there, and like there's, you know, 34 souls that I cherish, you know. It's really, I don't know, I can't even explain to you what a special experience it was.
What is the vibe there in Canada in regards to film? And obviously Canada's had a big game community, and even that's growing as it's kind of mimicked film in regards to some of the capabilities. But obviously, you know, like I mentioned, Jason's up there, you're up there. They seem like they're really, really wanting to grow that industry.
Yeah, you know, it's tough because there's, let's be honest, there's tax subsidy in Canada, right? Let's like show business, right? It's not show art. So people want to have the best financial chance that they can have to make films and make some money. And when you look at it from that perspective, it makes sense, you know, that it's exploding. The cool thing about it is that like you said, the video game industry and the VFX industry were already quite well established here. And now feature kind of falls into 3 different categories, you know, where you have like real full-on service, which is Micros, who did Little Prince and Captain Underpants. And then you've got Cinesite, which is doing more films, slightly less budget, but they turn out a lot of cool animation. And then ours, which is kind of fits in between, which is almost boutique, independent feature studio, and where we do choose projects to keep us going, but we only choose quality projects. And we have an opportunity, like we're working on a TV show for Netflix called Robozuna right now. We're building it up. We're going to be doing that soon.
Cool.
Our first TV show. So we've never done that before either. But, we don't know. But then I like where we're at in the middle, because I've worked at some place like Micros, and you know, like Cinesite is also big studio in the sense that they have a mothership as well. But I kind of like that things can be more nervous day to day in terms of like what's going to happen in a couple of years at our studio. But I don't care about a couple of years. I care about now and what's getting done now. And I learned that from Ballerina, that, you know, you just have a plan as much as you can, and then you just go day to day and make the best of it, you know.
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Well, I really appreciate you guys joining me in this podcast. This has been a blast. It's been a blast. Like I said, it's been a bit since I've done one, only because I've a little more gun shy after I lost one, and I'm hoping to get her back. She mentioned she would, so I'll mention that for the podcast. But this has been a really, really fun podcast, and just be able to meet up with you guys again. So no different time zones and stuff like that. So it wasn't not always easy to nail down the date and time, but I really just appreciate you guys joining me on this.
No, thanks, Larry. It's been great to see you and see everybody again here.
Very cool. So go see Ballerina /Leap. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. It looks beautiful. Check it out, as we said multiple times.
Pretty much in any country except apparently like Sweden and Denmark and Norway. I don't know what's going on there. Gotta call some people.
All right, get on the phone here.
All right, take care.
Take care. Thank you, guys.